Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey, Herman and Corn. I think I've mentioned on a previous episode or two that I'm a big fan of head torches, or have become very appreciative of one. During the last war with Iran, we're now living through the second chapter of this. I learned quickly that there's a reason that this is actually a fantastic thing to have in a preparedness bag, because when you're trying to find where a designated shelter is, these are often dilapidated places under not very well marked, sometimes even without electricity, deep underground in Jerusalem, and all sorts of weird spots in the city, you could say. And there, when you're in that kind of circumstance, and sometimes trying to get somewhere very quickly, when the siren goes off and you don't have time to go to one of the designated self spaces, you end up encountering some very intriguing spaces under buildings for, like, you know, disused storage warehouses, the bottoms of buildings, all sorts of intriguing locations. And these are just one thing. You don't want to have a big bulky torch or even a compact torch in your hand. You need your hands to open doors, move things out of the way. So head torches are brilliant. And for repairing computers, even for doing the vacuum cleaning. If you're one of those people who misplaces things 100 times a day, I've even found they're really helpful for that. I just put on sometimes a torch and I'm looking for something, and suddenly I can see. It's like my brain needs that strong illumination. Anyway, they're brilliant things. But the last a couple of days ago, or yesterday, gosh, feels like we're in a time warp here with the war. I was in one of these underground spaces and I had a moment to call family just to let them know I'm okay. And I forgot it. I forgot it was on. And my mum joked that I looked like I was a coal miner, and I never knew that was like the quintessential association, I guess. But I looked up today coal miners, and coal mining, which is what I'd like to talk about in today's episode, is one of those things that I thought was a relic of the past, mostly. We've all heard about black lung, and I was watching some videos on YouTube. Firstly, the coal mining is still employs people. I say of course because of all the non-renewable sources of energy, fossil fuels. I've always heard that coal is among the worst for air pollution, and that we're under a huge pressure globally to reduce our use of coal, which of course would reduce the demand for extraction of coal. But there is still a lot of coal being extracted, and you'll find some videos on YouTube of people in very different contexts from the perspective of health and safety and labor law. Some folks in mid-Central Asia doing it, some in the US. And I was watching these videos of these guys, you know, just deep down in a mine with their big headlamps going at it, and really, really physical job. I mean, if you complain about your job, imagine literally working down a coal mine. These guys put in crazy work, and I was just looking at them and I was like, how do you do this? All the videos were saying that in these Central Asian jobs, they'd be down the mines for 14 hours per day. And I was thinking, like, looking at how confined that environment is, how is it even possible to avoid contracting long-term lung damage in something like that? And I've mentioned that I'm asthmatic, and we learned about air pollution and air quality recently. But even for someone who has nothing like that and just very healthy lungs, it just seems like it really does make you kind of sad. I mean, just looking at people crouched underground in these conditions and with their pickaxe. So I looked that up and got some interesting information about black lung and how theoretically it's avoidable, but only under very specific. If the exposure is low enough, and it's often a factor of the exposure length and the actual conditions. So I'd love to learn a little bit about coal mining, Herman and Corn. Still a thing, an occupation that people do in 2026, and black lung also sounds like something that's a relic of the bygone age of medicine, but still cases, and some severe cases, are contracted. So how can it be avoided for those who are? How do those who are doing it, doing this occupation, avoid it? And what is the situation for the people who do this job? I mean, it's an incredible feat of strength and endurance when you watch these videos. They're very sobering. So for a change of topic from the nuclear and Iran related conversations, let's talk about coal mining in today's episode.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my weird prompts. I am Corn, and I am joined as always by my brother, who is currently adjusting his own headlamp for some reason.
Herman Poppleberry at your service, Corn. And yes, I am wearing the headlamp because, honestly, Daniel has a point. Since the power outages started getting more frequent during this current conflict with Iran, these things have become absolute lifesavers around the house. It is the ultimate hands-free tool.
It is. Daniel was actually telling me earlier how he felt like a coal miner while he was down in the basement trying to reset the breakers last night, and that led him to send us today's prompt. He was watching some videos of miners in Central Asia and Appalachia and realized that while we talk about coal as this thing of the past, there are still millions of people spending their lives underground right now in 2026.
It is a massive juxtaposition, right? We are living in an era where we talk about fusion breakthroughs and massive solar arrays. Yet the global economy is still very much tethered to this carbon-heavy rock. Daniel wanted us to dig into the current state of the industry, the health risks like black lung, and what it is actually like for the people doing that work today.
It is a sobering topic, especially when you look at the health data. But before we get into the grim stuff, Herman, let's talk about the macro view. I think a lot of people assume coal is just gone, or at least on its deathbed. Is that actually true?
Not even close, Corn. In fact, if you look at the data from 2024 and 2025, global coal consumption actually hit consecutive record highs. In 2025, we reached a staggering 8.85 billion tons. Even with the massive push for renewables, the sheer energy demand from developing economies, specifically China and India, has kept coal very much alive. China alone produces and consumes more than half of the world's coal. In the United States, it has declined for electricity generation, but it remains a massive export commodity and a strategic reserve.
And here in the Middle East, the recent escalations we have been discussing in the last few episodes have definitely shifted the energy composition. When natural gas lines are at risk or maritime trade is disrupted, people start looking back at stockpiled solids. Coal is easy to store. It does not leak. It does not explode if a pipe breaks. There is a certain brutal reliability to it that keeps it in the mix.
Exactly. It is the security blanket of the energy world. But that security comes at a massive human cost. Daniel mentioned the 14-hour shifts he saw in those videos from Central Asia. That is not just a grueling schedule, it is a physiological assault. When you are in a confined space for that long, every breath you take is a calculation of risk.
Let's talk about that breath. Black lung. We have all heard the term. It feels very 19th century, like something out of a Dickens novel. But from what I've been reading, it is actually making a comeback in a more aggressive form. Why is that?
This is where the technical details get really tragic. Black lung is officially known as coal workers' pneumoconiosis. It is caused by long-term inhalation of coal dust. The dust particles settle in the lungs, the body cannot get rid of them, and it creates inflammation and scarring, or fibrosis. But the reason we are seeing a resurgence, especially in younger miners in places like West Virginia and Kentucky, is something called crystalline silica.
Silica? That is basically sand, right?
Yes, it is found in quartz and other rocks. Here's the thing. The easy coal, the thick seams that were easy to get to, those are mostly gone in the older mining regions. So now miners have to cut through more rock to get to thinner seams of coal. When those massive cutting machines grind through sandstone and shale, they release silica dust. Silica is much more toxic to lung tissue than coal dust alone. It leads to what we call progressive massive fibrosis, or PMF, which is the most severe form of black lung. We are seeing miners in their 30s and 40s needing lung transplants. In central Appalachia, nearly 1 in 5 tenured miners now has some form of the disease.
That is terrifying. You would think with all the advances in technology since the 1970s, we would have solved the dust problem. I mean, we can build autonomous rovers for Mars, but we cannot keep a tunnel clear of dust.
We can, but it is a constant battle against physics and economics. In a modern mine, you have several lines of defense. The first is ventilation. You are basically trying to move a massive volume of fresh air through the mine to dilute the dust and carry it away. Then you have water sprays. The cutting heads on the mining machines have high-pressure nozzles that spray water directly onto the face of the coal to knock the dust down before it can get into the air.
But if the water is spraying and the air is moving, how is the dust still getting into people's lungs? Is it just a failure of the equipment?
It is often a matter of scale and proximity. Those longwall mining machines are incredible. They can be 1,000 feet wide and cut through thousands of tons of coal a day. The sheer volume of dust created is immense. And if the ventilation curtains are not set up perfectly, or if the water pressure drops, the dust bypasses the system. Also, miners have to wear personal protective equipment, like respirators. But imagine wearing a heavy, hot respirator for a 12 or 14-hour shift in a damp, cramped environment. It is incredibly uncomfortable, and sometimes people take them off just to catch their breath, which is exactly when the damage happens.
It is that classic trade-off between immediate comfort and long-term survival. I'm curious about the 14-hour shifts Daniel mentioned. If you are underground for that long, your body never really gets a chance to clear anything out. What is the actual environment like? Is it as cramped as it looks in the movies?
It depends on the mine. In some of the big western mines in the United States, the seams are huge. You can drive a truck through them. But in older mines, or in parts of Central Asia and Eastern Europe, you might be working in a seam that is only 30 or 40 inches high. You are literally on your hands and knees or lying on your side for the entire shift. Daniel's point about the head torches is spot on. In that environment, your light is your world. If your lamp fails, you are in total, absolute darkness. It is a sensory deprivation chamber that is also incredibly loud because of the machinery.
You know, it makes me think about the psychological toll as well. We did that episode a while back, I think it was episode 444, about running a home like a startup, and we talked about the importance of environment and light for mental health. Coal miners are the polar opposite of that. They are in a high-stress, high-danger, low-light environment for more than half of their waking hours.
And the stakes are always high. Beyond the lung issues, you have the risk of roof falls and methane explosions. Methane is naturally trapped in coal seams. When you break the coal, the gas is released. If it hits a certain concentration in the air, around 5 to 15%, it becomes highly explosive. One spark from a piece of machinery and the whole mine becomes a bomb. That is why everything underground has to be intrinsically safe, meaning it cannot produce a spark.
So, how are they monitoring this now? Are we still using the proverbial canary in a coal mine?
Thankfully, no. We have sophisticated electronic sensors now. They monitor methane, carbon monoxide, and oxygen levels in real time. Many mines now have wireless networks underground that relay this data to the surface. But again, you have to look at the global disparity. In a high-tech mine in Australia or the United States, the safety protocols are intense. But in an illegal or unregulated mine in a place like Jharkhand, India, or some of the smaller pits in Kyrgyzstan, they are essentially using 19th century methods with 21st century desperation.
That desperation is the key, isn't it? Daniel was asking about the overall situation for people in the field. Why do people still do it? In some regions, it is the only job that pays a living wage. In Appalachia, for generations, being a miner meant you were a provider. It was a badge of honor. But as the world tries to move away from coal, those communities are being left in a really difficult spot.
It is a massive social crisis. You have these towns that were built entirely around the mine. If the mine closes, the town dies. But if the mine stays open, the people die, just more slowly. It is a brutal choice. And even in 2026, with all our talk about a just transition to green energy, we have not really figured out how to replace those high-paying industrial jobs in rural areas.
I want to go back to the health side for a second. If someone is working in this field today, what can they actually do to avoid long-term damage? Is it just a matter of better masks?
Better masks help, but the real push right now is for better engineering controls and real-time dust monitoring. There are these devices called PDM, or personal dust monitors. A miner wears it on their belt, and it gives them a continuous readout of the dust concentration in their immediate area. If the levels spike, they can see it instantly and move or adjust the ventilation. Before these existed, you would just wear a sampling pump for a shift, send the filter to a lab, and find out 2 weeks later that you had been overexposed. By then, the damage is done.
It is like a Geiger counter for dust. That seems like it should be mandatory everywhere.
It is mandatory in many places now. In fact, back in April of 2024, the Mine Safety and Health Administration, or MSHA, issued a landmark final rule that cut the permissible exposure limit for silica dust in half, down to 50 micrograms per cubic meter. Coal mines were supposed to be fully compliant by April of 2025, though we are still seeing legal challenges from the industry here in early 2026. It is a constant trade-off between preventing an immediate explosion and preventing a slow death from lung disease.
It is fascinating and tragic. Herman, what about the automated mining we hear about? Can we just take the humans out of the equation entirely?
We are getting closer. In some of the big open-pit mines in Australia, they have autonomous haul trucks and drills. In underground mines, they have remote-controlled continuous miners where the operator stands hundreds of feet back from the face. But coal geology is messy. Rocks shift, seams pinch out, and machinery breaks. You still need people down there to fix things, to move the roof supports, and to navigate the unpredictable nature of the Earth. We are probably decades away from a truly human-free underground mine.
So, for the foreseeable future, we are still going to have millions of people like the ones Daniel saw in those videos, spending 14 hours a day in the dark. It really puts our daily complaints into perspective, doesn't it? I am sitting here annoyed that my internet is a bit laggy because of the satellite interference from the war, and there is a guy a mile underground in Tajikistan just hoping the ventilation fan doesn't stop.
It really does. And I think that is why Daniel's prompt resonated with me. We use the products of this labor every day. Even if you drive an electric car, there is a good chance some of the electricity used to charge it came from a coal plant. Even if you use steel, that steel was likely made using metallurgical coal.
Let's talk about the metallurgical coal for a second. That is different from the stuff we burn for power, right?
Yes, good distinction, Corn. Thermal coal is what we burn for electricity. Metallurgical, or coking coal, is used to make steel. You can replace thermal coal with solar, wind, or nuclear. But replacing coking coal in the steelmaking process is much harder. We are experimenting with green hydrogen for steel, but it is still in the early stages. So even if we stop burning coal for power tomorrow, we would still be mining it for the steel that builds our world. This is why metallurgical coal was recently added to several critical minerals lists. It is seen as essential for the infrastructure of the future.
Which means the health risks aren't going away. If anything, as we go for deeper and more difficult seams to get that high-quality coking coal, the silica risk might even increase.
That is exactly what the researchers are worried about. They are calling it a new epidemic of black lung. And what is really heartbreaking is that it is entirely preventable. If you keep the dust levels low enough, you don't get the disease. It is not like a virus you catch by accident. It is a direct result of the environment.
So, if you are a listener out there who works in any kind of dusty environment, not just coal mining, but construction or masonry, what is the takeaway?
The takeaway is that your lungs are incredibly fragile and they don't have a reset button. Once that scarring starts, it is permanent. If you are working around silica or coal dust, you have to be your own advocate. Don't trust that the ventilation is enough. Wear the highest quality respirator you can get and make sure it is fitted correctly. A mask with a gap around the nose is just a chin warmer. And if your employer isn't providing the right gear, that is a massive red flag.
It is also worth mentioning that technology is helping on the diagnostic side. We are getting much better at using high-resolution CT scans to catch the early signs of fibrosis long before it shows up on a standard X-ray. Early detection can mean the difference between changing careers and needing an oxygen tank by the time you are 50.
Absolutely. There is hope, but it requires a global commitment to valuing the lives of miners as much as we value the energy they produce.
Well said, Herman. I think we have covered a lot of ground today, from the macroeconomics of global coal demand to the microscopic damage caused by silica dust. It is a heavy topic, but an important one. Before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that if you are finding these deep dives interesting, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app. Whether it is Spotify or Apple Podcasts, those ratings really help new listeners find the show.
Yeah, it genuinely makes a difference. We see every review and we appreciate the feedback. It helps us know which rabbit holes you want us to jump down next.
And don't forget, you can find our full archive and the RSS feed at myweirdprompts.com. We have over 800 episodes now, covering everything from the science of missile attacks to the best way to organize your kitchen. Thanks to Daniel for sending this one in. It was a good reminder to look beneath the surface.
Literally. Stay curious, everyone, and stay safe.
Catch you later.
Bye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.